Have you ever wondered how much power you would possess if you simply refused to react? Imagine the moment someone insults you, provokes you, tests you, tries to bait you into emotional exposure, and you feel the familiar surge rising in your chest, that burning impulse to defend yourself, to clarify, to justify, to correct the narrative before it stains your name. And then imagine that you do nothing. No anger, no explanation, no visible wound, only silence, only absence, only a cold, unreadable stillness that leaves your opponent suspended in their own uncertainty. In that silence, something shifts. The battlefield rearranges itself. The person who tried to control the tempo of the encounter suddenly realizes they are alone in the arena, shouting at a shadow that refuses to echo back. And that is where the first fracture in their confidence begins to form. Power does not always roar. Often it withdraws. It withholds. It starves the opponent of the reaction they crave like oxygen. To understand this, you must descend into a darker chamber of human psychology, where pride and ego are not noble qualities but levers to be pulled, where emotion is not sacred but strategic, where the greatest victories are won not by domination through force, but by domination through restraint. Most people live exposed. Their faces betray their anger, their voices tremble with defensiveness, their eyes widen when accused. They believe that transparency is virtue, that explanation is justice, that reaction is strength. But the truth is more brutal. Every reaction is information. Every explanation is vulnerability. Every defense is a confession that you feel threatened. When you react, you reveal what hurts you. When you explain, you acknowledge the authority of your accuser. When you defend, you lower yourself into the courtroom they have constructed for you. Consider how easily people are manipulated through their need to be understood. They long to clarify misunderstandings, to correct lies to ensure their image remains intact. But this longing is precisely the chain that binds them. The moment someone realizes they can provoke you into explanation, they control you. They can tug at your emotions like strings. Watch you scramble to repair perception. Observe which words cause your composure to crack. Reaction is a currency, and most people spend it recklessly. They pay attention to every insult. They answer every accusation. They feed every rumor. They mistake noise for threat. And in doing so, they exhaust themselves while strengthening their enemies. Silence, however, is terrifying. Silence is a void into which the aggressor projects their own fears. When you do not respond, they begin to question their own position. Did they miscalculate? Did their words fail? Are they insignificant? Humans crave feedback. We are wired to seek acknowledgement. Even conflict is a form of acknowledgement. When you argue with someone, you validate them. When you defend yourself, you confirm that their opinion matters. But when you ignore them completely, you deny them existence in your psychological world. That denial is not passive, it is surgical, it is precise. It destabilizes the emotional equilibrium of the opponent. Picture a rival attempting to undermine you in a room full of observers. They make a cutting remark, carefully designed to sting. The room grows quiet. All eyes turn toward you, anticipating retaliation. This is the moment they believe they own. If you lash out, you appear emotional. If you defend yourself, you seem insecure. If you counterattack, you escalate. But if you pause, offer no change in expression, perhaps even shift your attention elsewhere as though nothing occurred, you alter the gravity of the room. The silence becomes heavier than the insult. The observers begin to question the aggressor's behavior rather than your composure. In that instant, you have reversed the polarity of power without uttering a single word. To never react is not to suppress emotion blindly. It is to understand that emotion is a weapon best concealed. The strongest predator in the forest does not reveal its heartbeat. It waits. It calculates. It chooses the precise moment of movement. In human interactions, emotional discipline creates asymmetry. Most people are transparent. They wear their feelings like open wounds. The one who masters stillness becomes unreadable. And what cannot be read cannot be predicted. What cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. The second layer of this dark strategy is even more unsettling. Never explain. Explanations feel noble. They feel fair. They feel like clarity. But beneath their surface lies a subtle surrender. When you explain yourself unnecessarily, you accept that someone else has the right to question your motives. You position yourself as subordinate to their judgment. You step into the frame they have defined. Power does not explain itself to every passerby. Authority does not beg to be understood. The lion does not issue a statement to the jungle each time it hunts. It acts, and its actions define reality. People often overestimate how much explanation is required. They assume that if they do not clarify their intentions, they will be misunderstood. But misunderstanding can be useful. Ambiguity can be a shield. When your motives are not fully transparent, others hesitate, they speculate, they tread carefully. Explanation removes that mystery. It narrows the possibilities. It gives your opponent a map of your reasoning. And once they have the map, they can anticipate your moves. There is a deeper psychological mechanism at play here. Humans are uncomfortable with uncertainty. When someone refuses to explain their actions, observers fill the gaps with assumptions. Often, those assumptions elevate the silent individual. People attribute confidence to the one who does not justify. They interpret brevity as strength. Meanwhile, the person who rushes to explain appears anxious to be accepted, and anxiety erodes authority. Imagine you make a decision that others dislike. They question you, press you, demand justification. If you respond with a long defense, you invite debate, you open the door to negotiation. You signal that your decision is flexible. But if you calmly state the decision without elaboration, maintaining composure, you create a boundary. Boundaries are not declared through aggression. They are enforced through consistency. When you do not explain beyond necessity, you communicate that your internal reasoning is not subject to public referendum. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the recognition that constant explanation dilutes presence. Those who explain too much are often seeking approval. They want to be liked. They want to be perceived as reasonable. But the pursuit of universal approval is incompatible with real power. If you aim to lead, to influence, to dominate strategically, you must accept that some will misunderstand you, some will resent you, some will invent narratives about you, and chasing those narratives is a trap. Each attempt to correct every falsehood pulls you deeper into other people's agendas. The third dimension of this philosophy is the most ruthless. Just ignore. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every opponent deserves engagement. Many provocations are tests designed to measure your emotional volatility. When someone criticizes you publicly, they are often less interested in truth and more interested in visibility. They want a reaction to amplify their relevance. If you grant it, you elevate them. If you ignore them, you shrink them back into obscurity. Attention is a spotlight. Choose carefully where you aim it. Ignoring is not weakness. It is selective blindness. It is strategic omission. In warfare, generals do not chase every skirmish. They choose battles that matter. In psychological conflict, the same principle applies. When you react to every minor offense, you dissipate your authority. When you ignore trivial attacks, you conserve energy and signal discernment. Others begin to notice that you cannot be easily drawn into chaos. They recognize that your silence is deliberate, not accidental. There is something profoundly unsettling about a person who cannot be baited. Most manipulators rely on predictability. They rely on the assumption that insult leads to anger, that accusation leads to defense, that exclusion leads to desperation. When you break this chain, you disrupt their strategy. You become an anomaly in their psychological calculations. And anomalies breed caution. But to master this art, you must confront your own ego. The desire to react is rooted in pride. The urge to explain is rooted in insecurity. The impulse to engage every provocation is rooted in fear of insignificance. To ignore is to accept that not every narrative about you requires correction. It is to trust that your actions over time will shape perception more effectively than arguments ever could. Picture a scenario where rumors circulate about your competence. Colleagues whisper, rivals smirk. The instinct is to gather evidence, to defend your record, to confront each critic. But what if you did nothing? What if you continued performing at a high level, maintaining composure, refusing to acknowledge the whispers? Over time, your consistency becomes louder than the rumors. The critics grow impatient. Without reaction, their narrative starves. The observers notice who remains steady and who seeks drama. This strategy requires patience, and patience is rare. Most people crave immediate resolution. They want to clear their name instantly. They want to win the argument now. But long-term dominance is rarely achieved through short-term emotional victories. It is achieved through controlled presence, through measured silence, through the refusal to descend into every conflict. There is a paradox here. By refusing to react, you appear less reactive. By refusing to explain, you appear more certain. By ignoring trivial threats, you appear larger than them. And perception is the foundation of power. Humans are not purely rational creatures. They respond to signals, to cues, to subtle hierarchies. When you demonstrate emotional containment, you ascend in perceived hierarchy. Think of the difference between a person who argues loudly in public and one who listens quietly, speaking only when necessary. The loud one may feel powerful in the moment, but over time, the quiet one commands more attention. Words become rare, and rarity increases value. Silence becomes a tool of gravity. Yet this philosophy is not about becoming cold or detached from reality. It is about strategic engagement. There will be moments when reaction is necessary, when explanation is prudent, when confrontation is unavoidable. But those moments must be chosen, not triggered. The difference between power and impulsiveness lies in selection. You decide when to respond. You decide when to clarify. You decide when to engage. And that decision is never dictated by provocation alone. When someone attempts to corner you emotionally, imagine stepping back internally. Observe your own rising impulses as though they belong to someone else. Ask yourself, what do they gain if I react? What do they gain if I explain? What do they gain if I fight this now? Often the answer reveals the trap. The true dark psychology here is not about cruelty toward others, but about sovereignty over yourself. Control your reaction, and you control the tempo. Control your explanation, and you control the narrative. Control your attention, and you control your energy. The one who governs themselves becomes difficult to govern by others. In the end, the world belongs not to the loudest voice, but to the most disciplined mind. Most conflicts are won before they are visibly fought. They are won in the quiet decision to remain unmoved, to let others exhaust themselves against your silence, to let them reveal their desperation while you reveal nothing. Never react impulsively, never explain unnecessarily, just ignore strategically. In that triad lies the foundation of psychological dominance. And once you taste the power of withheld response, you begin to see how much of human interaction is built on the fragile expectation of reaction. Remove that expectation, and you rewrite the rules of the game before anyone realizes the board has changed. The moment you master the art of withholding reaction, something subtle but irreversible begins to change inside you. You start to see how desperately the world feeds on emotional leakage. You notice the micro-expressions of people waiting for you to flinch. You feel the tension in a room when someone tests you, searching your eyes for confirmation that their words have landed. And you begin to understand that most battles are not fought with logic, but with nervous systems. Whoever controls their nervous system controls the encounter. Human beings are addicted to feedback. A raised eyebrow, a clenched jaw, a defensive tone, these are rewards to the provocateur. They are proof of impact. When someone insults you, they are not merely expressing opinion, they are probing for influence. They want to know whether they can reach inside your emotional architecture and rearrange it. When you react instantly, you answer their question. Yes, you can reach me. Yes, you can alter my state. Yes, you can make me dance. But when you remain still, when your breathing does not change, when your voice stays level, when your eyes neither harden nor soften, you create a vacuum, and vacuums disturb people. They begin to wonder whether their attempt failed. Doubt creeps in. Was the insult too weak? Is this person stronger than I thought? Am I irrelevant to them? The uncertainty gnaws at them in ways your anger never could. There is a reason the most dangerous interrogators speak less than they listen. Silence is not empty. It is pressure. It stretches the other person's mind until they feel compelled to fill the space. They overtalk. They reveal more than intended. They justify themselves without being asked. They begin to negotiate with a silence that never negotiated with them. And in that imbalance, information flows one way. Imagine you are confronted publicly by someone who questions your competence. They raise their voice slightly, confident that the crowd will enjoy the spectacle. You feel the heat rise in your chest. Your pride stings. Every instinct demands retaliation. But instead, you tilt your head slightly, offer a faint, almost imperceptible nod, and say nothing. Not dismissively, not aggressively, just nothing. Then you continue with your work as if the interruption was a minor background noise. Watch what happens next. The aggressor must now decide whether to escalate alone. If they press harder, they risk looking obsessive. If they retreat, they appear defeated. Either choice costs them something. You, meanwhile, lose nothing. You have not revealed insecurity, you have not acknowledged their authority to judge you, you have not legitimized the confrontation, you have simply continued existing at your chosen altitude. This is the first dark psychological trick, emotional asymmetry. You allow others to expend emotional energy while you conserve yours. Over time, this asymmetry compounds. They become reactive, you become stable, they become predictable, you become unreadable. And predictability is weakness. The one whose patterns are obvious can be manipulated. The one who resists pattern becomes a mystery. Mystery commands caution. But do not mistake stillness for passivity. There is calculation in it. The predator in the tall grass is not inactive. It is observing, measuring distance, waiting for the precise moment when movement is irreversible. When you refuse to react, you are not surrendering the field. You are choosing terrain. You are denying your opponent the timing they desire. Consider how often people attempt to provoke you when they feel threatened. Their attack is not random. It is defensive. They sense your competence, your potential, your quiet confidence, and it unsettles them. Instead of improving themselves, they try to destabilize you. If you react, you validate their strategy. If you ignore, you signal that their insecurity is not your responsibility. There is something profoundly destabilizing about being ignored. Humans interpret it as social death. To be unseen is to feel powerless. This is why even negative attention feels preferable to no attention at all. Arguments are intoxicating because they confirm relevance. But when you deny someone even the dignity of conflict, you strip them of narrative significance. They become a footnote in your story, not a chapter. And this leads to the second dark maneuver embedded within silence: selective visibility. You choose whom to acknowledge. You choose whose voice reaches you. You treat attention as a scarce resource. When someone earns it through value, you grant it. When someone seeks it through provocation, you withhold it. Over time, people learn the pattern. They realize that drama does not move you. Excellence might, respect might, but noise will not. This forces a subtle shift in their behavior. If they want your engagement, they must elevate themselves. They must contribute rather than attack. In this way, your silence becomes a filter, refining the quality of those who approach you. Yet there is danger here. Silence without inner discipline becomes suppressed rage. Ignoring without clarity becomes avoidance. The strategy only works if it is rooted in genuine indifference to trivial attacks. If you ignore externally but rage internally, your body will betray you. Micro-expressions will leak. Your tone will harden unpredictably. The mask will crack. True non-reaction is cultivated through self-observation. When insulted, you notice the surge of adrenaline. You label it silently: anger, ego, fear, and instead of obeying it, you let it crest and dissolve. This is not weakness, it is mastery. You are training your nervous system not to be commanded by external stimuli. You are breaking the chain between provocation and response. Most people live on that chain. Someone presses a button, they react. Someone praises them, they glow. Someone criticizes them, they shrink or attack. Their state is outsourced to the environment. But the individual who severs that chain becomes sovereign. They decide their state independent of external turbulence. There is also strategic value in unpredictability. If people cannot predict whether you will react, they hesitate to provoke you. But if you consistently refuse to react to trivialities, they begin to doubt their leverage. And leverage is everything in psychological warfare. The moment someone believes they have none, their aggression fades into caution. Imagine evil attempting to discredit you behind closed doors. They spread insinuations. They exaggerate minor mistakes. They hope you will hear about it and confront them in anger, creating a spectacle that confirms their narrative. But instead, you do nothing publicly. You continue your work with quiet precision. You allow time to erode the credibility of their whispers. Eventually, observers notice the mismatch between rumor and reality. The rival, having invested emotional capital into a failing narrative, appears petty. Silence exposes pettiness. Reaction conceals it. Now consider explanation. The instinct to clarify is deeply human. We fear being misunderstood because we equate misunderstanding with loss of control. But there is a darker truth. When you explain yourself excessively, you reveal internal doubt. The more words you use to justify a decision, the more negotiable it appears. Picture a leader announcing a difficult decision. If they ramble, offering lengthy rationalizations, the audience senses uncertainty. Questions multiply. Challenges arise. But if the leader states the decision calmly, briefly, and moves forward, the brevity signals conviction. People may not like it, but they respect the firmness. Conviction is contagious. Doubt is contagious too. When you refuse to explain beyond what is necessary, you create a psychological boundary. Boundaries communicate hierarchy. They say, implicitly, this is not open for debate. And humans respond to perceived hierarchy instinctively. They test it at first. Of course, they push, they question. But if your composure remains intact, if your responses remain measured and minimal, they adapt. There is an unsettling beauty in this restraint. It feels counterintuitive because society often preaches transparency as virtue, but transparency without strategy is exposure. You do not owe everyone access to your reasoning. You do not owe everyone emotional clarity. Selective opacity is protection. Think of your mind as a fortress. Not every passerby deserves a tour of its inner chambers. When someone demands explanation aggressively, ask yourself what they truly seek. Is it understanding, or is it leverage? Often, it is the latter. They want to know your motivations so they can anticipate, counter, or manipulate them. By limiting explanation, you limit exploitable data, and then comes the most ruthless dimension, ignoring not just provocations but opportunities for petty revenge. When someone wrongs you, the temptation to retaliate can be intoxicating. You imagine exposing them, humiliating them, proving them inferior, but revenge ties you to them. It anchors your energy to their existence. It makes them central in your narrative. Ignoring them, however, erases them. There is cold power in erasure. To act as though someone's betrayal is beneath acknowledgement communicates that they never possessed the significance required to wound you deeply. Whether or not that is emotionally true is irrelevant. Perception shapes reality. Over time, as you cultivate this discipline, something shifts in how others approach you. They become more deliberate. They choose their words carefully. They sense that you cannot be easily provoked. They recognize that drama will not draw you out. And this recognition breeds respect, even from those who dislike you. Respect does not always emerge from warmth. Sometimes it emerges from unshakability. But this path is not comfortable. It demands that you endure moments of misinterpretation. People may label you cold, distant, arrogant. They may say you are unresponsive. Let them. The need to correct every label is the same trap wearing a different mask. If you chase perception constantly, you become enslaved to it. Instead, focus on consistency. Consistency is louder than rebuttal. When your actions align with your standards repeatedly, over time, narratives collapse against reality. There will be moments when silence feels like swallowing fire, when an accusation cuts deeply because it contains a grain of truth, when a betrayal stings so sharply that your body trembles with the urge to confront. In those moments, remember that immediate reaction satisfies emotion but often sabotages strategy. Time is an ally. Distance clarifies. Many confrontations lose intensity if denied oxygen. You are not avoiding conflict. You are choosing timing. Timing transforms outcomes. A reaction delivered in anger gives your opponent ammunition. A response delivered later, when emotion has cooled, can be surgical. Sometimes the most devastating move is not immediate rebuttal, but quiet documentation, quiet preparation, quiet positioning. While they believe you are passive, you are calculating. And here lies the deeper truth. The one who appears calm often terrifies more than the one who rages. Rage is loud, but fleeting. Calm is controlled and enduring. Calm suggests hidden depth. Hidden depth suggests capability. When you walk into a room and carry this discipline with you, people sense it before you speak. Your movements are economical, your gaze steady. You do not chase laughter. You do not seek validation. You are present, but not performing. This subtle shift alters the social dynamics around you. Those who rely on chaos to dominate find no foothold. Those who respect structure gravitate toward you. The world is filled with noise, outrage cycles, public arguments, emotional exhibitions. Most of it is theater, and theater requires audience participation. Withdraw your participation, and the performance weakens. Never react impulsively. Never explain compulsively. Just ignore strategically. not because you are indifferent to everything, but because you are selective about what deserves your mind. And as you practice this, you begin to see how fragile most power truly is. It depends on reaction, it depends on emotional compliance. Remove those, and the architecture trembles. The mind that cannot be provoked becomes a fortress in a world addicted to sparks. The voice that does not rush to justify becomes an anchor in a sea of excuses. The presence that ignores trivial hostility becomes gravity itself, and gravity does not argue, it simply pulls everything into its orbit without ever raising its voice. There comes a point, once you have tasted the power of disciplined silence, when you begin to see human behavior as a pattern of hunger for validation, hunger for recognition, hunger for control. And you realize that most conflicts are not born from strength, but from starvation. People provoke because they crave acknowledgement. They criticize because they crave elevation. They explain themselves endlessly because they crave reassurance that they matter. When you understand this, you stop taking attacks personally. You start seeing them as symptoms. This is where the third dark psychological maneuver emerges: controlled invisibility. It is not merely about ignoring insults. It is about mastering when to be seen and when to withdraw. Visibility is currency. Those who are constantly visible become predictable. Those who appear selectively create tension. Tens. Ion generates intrigue. Intrigue generates influence. Imagine a room filled with ambitious individuals, each trying to dominate the conversation. Voices overlap. Opinions clash. Everyone competes for intellectual territory. In such chaos, most believe the loudest wins. But observe carefully. The one who speaks least, who listens deeply, who withholds commentary until the precise moment, gradually becomes the focal point. When they finally speak, the room quiets, not because they demanded silence, but because their silence cultivated anticipation. Anticipation is power. When you react frequently, you train others to expect access to your emotions. When you explain every move, you train them to expect transparency. When you engage every critic, you train them to believe they can summon you at will. But when your reactions are rare, your explanations minimal, your engagement selective, you become unpredictable, and unpredictability forces respect. This unpredictability must be intentional. It is not about erratic behavior. It is about emotional economy. You ration your responses. You measure your words. You decide consciously where your energy flows. And because humans are instinctively attuned to hierarchy, they begin to perceive you differently. The one who does not chase approval appears self-contained. The one who does not argue appears secure. The one who does not respond to every call appears in demand. There is a darker layer to this. Silence invites projection. When people cannot read you, they project their assumptions onto you. Some will assume confidence, others will assume arrogance, some will fear hidden motives. But all projections reveal more about them than about you. By remaining opaque, you turn others into mirrors reflecting their own psychology. Consider a rival who attempts to decode you. They analyze your gestures, your tone, your timing. They search for weaknesses, for tells. But if you offer little variation, little emotional leakage, they grow frustrated. Their mind begins to invent narratives to fill the gaps. They may attribute cunning where there is simply composure. They may suspect strategy where there is only restraint. And sometimes their imagination will construct a version of you far more formidable than reality. In this way, silence amplifies perception beyond your actual actions. This is not deception through lies. It is deception through absence. Now, imagine a scenario where you are accused unfairly. The accusation spreads quickly. It would be easy to issue a public defense, to counter every claim with evidence. But you pause. You ask yourself, who benefits if I react immediately? Often the accuser thrives on the spectacle. They want engagement. They want escalation. They want to position themselves opposite you in a dramatic narrative. If you respond with outrage, you grant them relevance. If you defend passionately, you validate their attack as worthy of your energy. But if you remain composed, addressing only what is absolutely necessary, and allow your consistent behavior to contradict the accusation over time, you undermine their strategy. Observers notice your restraint. They compare it to the accuser's intensity. Gradually, credibility shifts. Time becomes your ally. Most people are prisoners of immediacy. They believe every attack must be answered now. But immediacy is emotional, not strategic. The patient mind understands that narratives decay, outrage exhausts itself, rumors collapse under the weight of sustained reality. By refusing to accelerate the drama, you allow it to burn out without your fuel. There is also power in delayed response. When you do choose to respond, do so when the emotional climate has cooled. When others expect retaliation and none comes, they relax. They assume you have accepted the situation. Then, at a moment of your choosing, you deliver a measured statement, calm and precise. Because it arrives unexpectedly, it carries greater weight. It feels intentional rather than reactive. Control of timing is control of perception. The fourth dark psychological truth woven into this philosophy is that humans overestimate the importance of their own provocations. When someone attacks you, they believe they have struck at your core. But often the attack reveals more about their insecurity than your weakness. If you react defensively, you imply that they were correct to perceive vulnerability. If you remain unaffected, you imply that their assessment was insignificant. Insignificance is a painful realization. To ignore someone strategically is to communicate, without words, that they do not occupy space in your mental hierarchy. This can destabilize even the most confident individuals. They begin to escalate, trying harder to elicit response. They become louder, more dramatic, more obvious. And in doing so, they often expose their desperation to observers. Desperation erodes authority. There is a chilling elegance in watching someone unravel against your composure. They attempt sarcasm, you offer neutrality. They escalate to accusation, you maintain stillness. They attempt mockery, you shift focus. Each attempt becomes more transparent. Each failure amplifies your quiet dominance. But this strategy requires emotional detachment from the need to win publicly. You must be comfortable with moments where observers do not immediately understand your silence. Some may misinterpret it as weakness. Let them. True power is not validated instantly. It accumulates through pattern. Picture a leader who is constantly drawn into petty disputes. Their authority fragments. They appear small. Now picture a leader who rarely engages in triviality. When they do speak, it feels deliberate. Over time, people learn that access to their reaction is not guaranteed. It must be earned. This creates psychological elevation. Elevation is subtle but transformative. When others perceive you as elevated, they self-regulate around you. They moderate their tone. They measure their words. They hesitate before provoking. You have not demanded respect. You have cultivated it through non-reactivity. There is also a personal transformation that occurs when you internalize this discipline. You begin to feel less entangled in the emotional turbulence of others. Their anger no longer dictates your mood. Their opinions no longer pierce as deeply. You become anchored in your own internal compass. And anchoring is power. Without anchoring, you drift wherever external forces push you. With anchoring, you choose direction deliberately. You are not immune to emotion. You are sovereign over it. This sovereignty radiates. People sense when they cannot control you through approval or disapproval. They sense when praise does not inflate you and criticism does not deflate you, and this neutrality unsettles them. Why? Because manipulation relies on extremes. If praise makes you euphoric, it can be weaponized. If criticism makes you collapse, it can be exploited. But if you respond to both with measured equilibrium, the manipulator loses tools. Equilibrium is armor. There will be moments when ignoring is misinterpreted as arrogance. Some will accuse you of being cold. Some will claim you think yourself superior. Understand that these labels are attempts to provoke reaction. If you rush to reassure them, you re-enter their frame. If you remain composed, they must reconcile their discomfort internally. Often, what they label arrogance is simply your refusal to lower yourself into unnecessary drama. There is also strategic absence. Sometimes the most powerful statement is not presence, but withdrawal. If a conversation devolves into emotional chaos, leave it. Not dramatically. Not with slamming doors or cutting remarks. Simply disengage. Your absence communicates that the interaction no longer meets your standards. This forces others to confront the quality of their behavior. Absence creates space for reflection. When you are always available for conflict, conflict finds you. When you are selectively available, conflict must adjust. People begin to approach you differently because they know that access is not guaranteed. They must elevate the conversation to keep you engaged. This philosophy does not suggest emotional numbness. It suggests emotional strategy. Feel fully, but reveal selectively. Observe deeply, but respond sparingly. Choose battles not based on ego but on long-term positioning. And always remember, the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. Power often resides in the one who can walk away without explanation, who can endure misunderstanding without panic, who can be attacked without flinching. When you master the art of never reacting impulsively, never explaining compulsively, and ignoring strategically, you begin to move through the world differently. You become less concerned with being liked and more concerned with being effective, less focused on winning arguments and more focused on shaping outcomes. In that shift, something profound occurs. You stop playing the visible game of words and start playing the invisible game of perception. You realize that most people fight on the surface, where noise dominates, but beneath the surface, where silence stretches and timing matters, lies the true battlefield. And on that battlefield, the one who controls themselves controls the war. By the time you understand the mechanics of silence and selective visibility, you begin to see something even darker beneath the surface of human interaction. Most people do not seek truth in conflict. They seek emotional leverage. They are not trying to understand you. They are trying to move you, to tilt your balance, to provoke instability, to create cracks in your composure that they can widen over time. And once you recognize this, you stop viewing arguments as exchanges of ideas and start seeing them as tests of control. Control is rarely seized in dramatic fashion. It is accumulated through small concessions. A defensive explanation here, a late-night message sent in frustration. Each moment feels insignificant, but together they construct a psychological map of you, your triggers, your fears, your boundaries. Once someone holds that map, they no longer need to attack directly. They can press precisely where you are weakest. The art of never reacting is not about pride. It is about denying access to that map. Consider how easily most people are studied. Observe them long enough, and you know exactly what will upset them. Mention their insecurity, and their tone sharpens. Question their competence, and they rush to justify. Exclude them, and they chase. Praise them, and they soften. They are readable, and readability invites manipulation. But imagine becoming opaque. Imagine responding to praise with the same measured calm as criticism. Imagine meeting insult with neutrality and success with quiet restraint. You do not oscillate wildly between emotional highs and lows. You remain centered. To the outside observer, you are difficult to decode. They cannot easily predict which move will influence you. And unpredictability shifts power. There is something profoundly unsettling about a person who cannot be emotionally cornered. Most strategies of dominance rely on forcing someone into reaction. Anger, fear, shame, urgency. These reactions create openings. They cloud judgment. They accelerate decision-making under pressure. But when you remain still under psychological attack, you stretch time. You create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you retain agency. Agency is the foundation of power. Picture a confrontation where someone attempts to humiliate you publicly. They exaggerate a mistake. They imply incompetence. The crowd shifts, sensing drama. The trap is clear. If you defend aggressively, you appear rattled. If you counterattack, you escalate. But if you look at them calmly and say nothing beyond a brief, controlled acknowledgement before redirecting the conversation to substance, you dismantle the spectacle. You have denied them the performance they wanted. Performance requires participation. When you refuse to participate, you become immune to the theater of petty dominance. Over time, people notice. They recognize that your presence cannot be hijacked for entertainment or manipulation, and this recognition creates psychological distance. They approach you differently because they sense that access to your emotional state is restricted. This restriction is not hostility, it is sovereignty. There is a reason rulers throughout history often cultivated mystique. When too much is known about you, your doubts, your insecurities, your reasoning, your image shrinks. Familiarity breeds predictability. Predictability breeds vulnerability. But when parts of you remain private, when your reasoning is concise rather than exhaustive, when your reactions are measured rather than impulsive, you maintain dimension. Dimension creates gravity. Gravity draws others inward without effort. It does not chase. It does not argue. It simply exists with force. The person who never reacts impulsively begins to carry this gravitational presence. Conversations slow around them. Energy adjusts. People calibrate themselves. Yet there is a deeper psychological maneuver embedded within this philosophy: the power of strategic indifference. Indifference, when authentic and selective, destabilizes those who rely on emotional influence. If someone attempts to compete with you and you show no sign of rivalry, they are forced to confront their own competitiveness. If someone attempts to provoke jealousy and you remain unmoved, their tactic collapses. Indifference strips emotional weapons of their sharpness, but indifference must be disciplined. It cannot be theatrical. Feigned indifference often leaks through microexpressions, through subtle tension in the jaw, through clipped speech. True indifference comes from reordering your priorities. When your focus is anchored in long-term objectives, short-term provocations lose significance. They become distractions rather than threats. Ask yourself in moments of conflict, does this matter in a year? Does this shape my trajectory? If the answer is no, then reacting serves only ego, not strategy. Ego is the most easily manipulated element of the human psyche. It craves recognition. It demands defense. When someone questions you, your ego screams for retaliation. But ego-driven reaction rarely aligns with long-term dominance. It seeks immediate relief, not strategic positioning. To master this philosophy, you must learn to observe your ego as an internal actor rather than your identity. When insulted, notice the internal voice that demands explanation. When challenged, notice the urge to prove, and then ask, who benefits if I obey this impulse? Often the answer is not you. There is also immense power in selective response. When you finally choose to react, it should feel rare and precise. Because you have conditioned others to expect composure, any deviation becomes significant. If you raise your voice after months of restraint, the impact is magnified. If you deliver a firm correction after sustained patience, it resonates deeply. Scarcity increases value. Words like currency lose impact when overused. The individual who argues daily becomes background noise. The individual who speaks only when necessary commands attention. This is not silence born of fear, it is silence born of control. Now imagine a different scenario. Someone attempts to sabotage you quietly, undermining your credibility behind your back. You become aware of it. The instinct is to confront immediately, to expose them, to demand accountability. But instead you document, you observe, you allow them to continue believing you are unaware. Their confidence grows. They become careless. Eventually, when the moment is strategically optimal, you address the issue with evidence, calmly and without emotional charge. Because you did not react impulsively, you preserved leverage. Impulsivity sacrifices leverage for emotional satisfaction. Restraint preserves leverage for decisive action. There is also a psychological ripple effect when you refuse to explain yourself unnecessarily. People begin to project competence onto you. They assume you have reasons, even if they do not know them. Confidence is often inferred from brevity. Doubt is often inferred from over-clarification. When someone asks why you made a decision, you can answer concisely, not defensively, not with a barrage of justifications. Just enough to establish direction, then move on. Lingering invites debate. Debating invites dilution. Dilution erodes authority. It requires steadiness. But understand this, the path of non-reaction is lonely at times. You will endure moments where you feel misunderstood, moments where silence feels heavy, moments where others bond over shared outrage while you stand apart. This isolation is part of the discipline. When you detach from the emotional contagion of the crowd, you step outside the collective rhythm. The crowd reacts, the strategist observes. Crowds are predictable. They surge with trends, with outrage, with excitement. The strategist waits. By not reacting to every wave, you conserve clarity, and clarity is rare in emotionally charged environments. There is also a paradox here. When you ignore trivial hostility, some will attempt to escalate in order to force a reaction. They will grow louder, more personal, more dramatic. This is the critical test. If you break composure at this stage, you confirm that persistence can crack you. But if you remain steady, their escalation backfires. Observers begin to see the imbalance, and imbalance shapes narrative. When one person appears composed and the other appears agitated, neutrality often favors the composed. People trust steadiness instinctively. It signals reliability. It signals strength. Even those who dislike you may respect the discipline. This discipline must extend beyond public scenarios. In private interactions, The same rules apply. If someone attempts to guilt you into compliance, resist immediate defense. Guilt thrives on reaction. Calm acknowledgement without over-explanation disrupts the dynamic. If someone tries to rush you into a decision through urgency, slow the tempo. Urgency is a tool of control. By maintaining calm pacing, you reclaim timing. Timing, again, is everything. Those who control timing control momentum, and momentum influences outcomes long before final decisions are made. When you internalize these dark psychological truths, your relationships begin to shift. People sense boundaries without you announcing them. They learn that emotional manipulation yields little return. They may attempt it once or twice, but when it fails consistently, they recalibrate. You are teaching others how to treat you through what you tolerate and what you ignore. Tolerance is not weakness when it is selective. Ignoring is not avoidance when it is strategic. Silence is not submission when it is deliberate. The world will always contain noise, criticism, provocation, rumor, envy. You cannot silence all of it, but you can decide which frequencies reach your inner world. You can decide which voices deserve response. You can decide when explanation is necessary and when it is indulgent. In that decision lies your sovereignty. When you walk into conflict with the knowledge that you do not have to react, that you do not have to explain, that you can simply observe and choose, you carry an invisible advantage. Others are bound by impulse. You are guided by intention, and intention is colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than emotion, unleashed. Because emotion fights in the moment, intention wins over time. As your discipline deepens, you begin to notice a transformation not only in how others respond to you, but in how you perceive the architecture of power itself. You see that most people live in reaction loops, endlessly responding to stimuli like sparks igniting dry grass. An insult becomes anger. Anger becomes retaliation. Retaliation becomes escalation. Escalation becomes chaos. And chaos consumes clarity. This loop is ancient, primal, instinctive. It is also exploitable. The one who never reacts impulsively steps outside the loop. When you step outside it, you see something unsettling. The majority of conflicts were never about truth or justice. They were about ego preservation, about dominance signaling, about proving who can influence whom. And once you recognize that influence is the real currency, you understand that refusing to be influenced emotionally is the first act of rebellion. Influence is subtle. It does not always arrive as aggression. Sometimes it arrives as praise, sometimes as sympathy. A compliment can be bait as easily as an insult. If praise lifts you too high, it can later be withdrawn to destabilize you. If sympathy softens you too quickly, it can be weaponized into obligation. The mind that reacts equally to flattery and criticism becomes easy to steer. But when you remain centered regardless of external tone, steering becomes difficult. Imagine someone attempting to manipulate you through admiration. They elevate you publicly, speak highly of your intelligence, your discipline, your uniqueness. Many would bask in this light, relax their guard, reveal more of themselves. But you respond with quiet appreciation and nothing more. You do not lean into the praise. You do not chase more of it. You treat it as neutral information. The manipulator finds no entry point. Emotional neutrality is armor. Now imagine urgency. Someone pressures you to decide quickly, to respond immediately, to clarify now. Urgency compresses time. Compressed time reduces rational thought. It pushes you into reaction. But when you slow down deliberately, when you refuse to match their pace, you reclaim psychological dominance. You communicate that your decisions operate on your clock, not theirs. Time, in this philosophy, is a weapon. Most people allow others to dictate tempo. They respond instantly to messages. They rush to defend their name. They hurry to resolve discomfort. In doing so, they reveal anxiety. The one who controls tempo controls perception. Delayed response can communicate confidence. Measured pacing can communicate authority. Silence can communicate that you are not dependent on immediate validation. Dependency is weakness in psychological warfare. If someone knows that you need their approval, they control you. If someone knows that you fear their disapproval, they control you. But if you respond to both with equanimity, they lose leverage. And when leverage disappears, so does dominance. There is another dark layer to ignoring strategically: selective investment. Not every relationship deserves equal emotional energy. Not every critic deserves rebuttal. Not every slight deserves memory. When you invest attention indiscriminately, you dilute your focus. But when you allocate it carefully, you increase its impact. Think of attention as a spotlight in a dark theater. Wherever it shines, the audience looks. If you shine it on petty antagonists, you elevate them. If you shine it on excellence, you reinforce it. Ignoring is not passive. It is redirecting the spotlight away from what does not serve your trajectory. This requires ruthless prioritization. You must decide what aligns with your long-term positioning and what is merely noise. Noise feels urgent because it is loud. But loudness is not significance. Significance is often quiet. The strategic mind asks different questions than the emotional mind. The emotional mind asks, how do I prove them wrong? The strategic mind asks, does proving them wrong advance my position? The emotional mind asks, how do I defend my pride? The strategic mind asks, is my pride worth the energy cost? Energy is finite. Influence is cumulative. Waste neither. Picture a rival who continuously provokes you in small ways. Subtle jabs, dismissive tones, veiled criticisms. They are testing thresholds. They want to see where your boundary lies. If you react to each jab, they map your limits. But if you ignore minor provocations consistently, they grow uncertain. They may escalate once, twice, searching for reaction. But if they encounter the same composure, they begin to doubt their strategy. Doubt erodes aggression. When aggression fails repeatedly, it often transforms into caution or withdrawal. Your non-reaction has reshaped their behavior without confrontation. This does not mean you tolerate true injustice or severe harm indefinitely. There are moments when decisive action is required, but even decisive action can be executed without emotional volatility. When you act from calm conviction, rather than reactive fury, your moves are cleaner. They carry legitimacy, is strengthened by composure. There is something deeply unsettling about someone who delivers consequences without visible anger. Anger can be dismissed as emotional excess. Calm action cannot. It signals that the decision was not impulsive but considered. As you embody this discipline, you will notice that some individuals feel uncomfortable around you. They cannot read you easily. They cannot predict your reactions. They sense that manipulation is unlikely to succeed. This discomfort is not hostility. It is adjustment. They are recalibrating to a dynamic where emotional influence is limited. Others will feel drawn to your steadiness. In a world addicted to reaction, composure feels rare. It feels safe. It feels powerful. They may not articulate it, but they sense that you are not governed by chaos. Chaos seeks reaction. Order thrives in restraint. There is also the matter of reputation. Reputation is shaped less by what you say and more by how you respond under pressure. Anyone can appear composed when praised. True character reveals itself when challenged. If, under scrutiny, you remain measured, you build an aura of reliability. If, under attack, you remain calm, you build an aura of strength. Time and perception, once crystallized, becomes difficult to shatter. Consider how leaders are judged, not by how passionately they defend themselves, but by how steadily they navigate crisis. Emotional eruptions may satisfy audiences briefly, but steadiness inspires confidence. The one who never appears rushed, never appears desperate. This individual becomes a reference point. Reference points attract influence. When others seek guidance, they gravitate toward the stable. When they seek validation, they gravitate toward the reactive. Decide which role you wish to embody. There will be moments when silence feels like surrender, when ignoring feels like letting injustice stand unchallenged. In those moments, ask yourself whether immediate reaction serves resolution or ego. Often, allowing time to reveal truth is more powerful than immediate defense. Truth has endurance. Reaction has immediacy. Endurance outlasts immediacy. This philosophy is not about suppressing emotion permanently. It is about controlling its expression strategically. Feel anger internally if it arises. Acknowledge hurt privately if it exists. But choose carefully when and how those emotions are displayed. Expression is a tool, and tools must be wielded deliberately. Imagine two individuals facing criticism. One explodes, defending every point passionately. The other listens, nods, and responds briefly with clarity. Weeks later, observers remember not the details of the argument, but the demeanor. They remember who appeared stable and who appeared volatile. Volatility invites caution, but not respect. Stability invites trust, and trust, even among rivals, is a form of power. When people believe you cannot be easily shaken, they hesitate to attack recklessly. They know their efforts may yield little return. Over time, this hesitation protects you more effectively than any counter-argument. The deeper you internalize this discipline, the more you detach from the need to be understood by everyone. You accept that misunderstanding is inevitable. You accept that some narratives will circulate beyond your control. And instead of chasing each one, you focus on living in a way that contradicts them consistently. Consistency is silent persuasion. Silence, explanation, and reaction are not merely behaviors. They are signals. Signals of insecurity or confidence. Signals of hierarchy or equality. Signals of emotional dependence or independence. When you refuse to react impulsively, you signal independence. When you refuse to explain unnecessarily, you signal authority. When you ignore trivial provocations, you signal selectivity. Selectivity implies value, and value commands attention without demanding it. This is the deeper architecture of the dark psychology you are mastering. It is not about cruelty. It is about self-governance so complete that others cannot easily intrude. It is about creating an internal fortress where external turbulence crashes without shifting your foundation. The world will test you relentlessly. It will tempt you with outrage. It will bait you with insult. It will pressure you with urgency. Each test is an opportunity to reinforce your discipline. Each moment of restraint strengthens your position. Each moment of impulsive reaction weakens it. And over time, as these moments accumulate, your identity transforms. You are no longer the person who reacts because something was said. You are the person who chooses whether it deserves acknowledgement. You are no longer the one who explains to soothe doubt. You are the one whose actions speak with such consistency that explanation becomes unnecessary. You become the calm center around which storms exhaust themselves. And storms, no matter how violent, cannot cess. You sustain themselves without resistance. They need friction. Remove friction, and they dissipate into silence. And now you stand at the threshold of a realization that most will never dare to face. The world is not moved by those who shout the loudest, defend the hardest, or explain the longest. It is moved by those who control themselves when control is most difficult. It bends, subtly and slowly, around those who cannot be emotionally steered. Look back at every conflict you have witnessed, the arguments that spiraled, the reputations damaged in moments of rage, the alliances broken because pride demanded immediate retaliation. How many of those collapses began with a reaction, a single impulsive sentence, a defensive explanation, a refusal to ignore something trivial? Most people lose power not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack restraint. Restraint is invisible, but its consequences are enormous. When you do not react, you interrupt the script others have written for you. When you do not explain, you deny them the authority to interrogate your intent. When you ignore strategically, you deprive them of relevance in your internal world. Relevance is what they seek. To be your enemy is to want acknowledgement. To criticize you is to want validation. To provoke you is to want evidence of impact. And when you offer none, you create a psychological void that unsettles even the boldest adversary. But this final understanding is the most ruthless of all. Your silence does not merely protect you, it reshapes others. When someone fails to provoke you repeatedly, they are forced into self-confrontation. They must question their own tactics. They must wonder why their influence failed. They must sit alone with the echo of their own aggression. And in that solitude, something shifts. Some will grow more cautious. Some will grow resentful. Some will withdraw entirely. But all will adjust. You did not fight them. You altered the terrain. This is what makes the discipline so powerful. You are not reacting to the world. You are conditioning it. Every time you refuse to be baited, you raise the cost of attacking you. Every time you refuse to over-explain, you raise the standard of engaging you. Every time you ignore trivial hostility, you diminish its market value. Over time, people learn. They learn that emotional manipulation yields no profit with you. They learn that gossip receives no spotlight. They learn that urgency does not accelerate your decisions. They learn that your state cannot be easily hijacked, and what cannot be hijacked cannot be controlled. Control is the silent axis upon which all power turns. Most people believe control means dominating others, forcing outcomes. overpowering resistance. But the deeper truth is colder. Control begins within. If you cannot control your reaction, you cannot control your narrative. If you cannot control your impulse to explain, you cannot control your positioning. If you cannot control your attention, you cannot control your direction. Self-control is strategic dominance in its purest form. Yet understand this clearly. This path is not comfortable. There will be nights when you replay insults in your mind, resisting the urge to respond. There will be moments when your silence feels misunderstood, when others bomb through shared outrage and you stand apart, calm and detached. You may feel isolated. You may feel unseen. But remember, being unseen is not the same as being powerless. In fact, it is often the opposite. When you are unseen emotionally, you are unreadable. When you are unreadable, you are unpredictable. And unpredictability forces caution. Caution alters behavior. Altered behavior shifts outcomes. Think of the person who always reacts. You know exact how to influence them. Praise them, and they glow. Criticize them, and they burn. Exclude them, and they chase. Include them, and they soften. Their emotional responses are switches on a wall. Anyone can flip them. Now think of the person who rarely reacts. Praise them, and they nod. Criticize them, and they nod. Exclude them, and they remain steady. There are no obvious switches, no visible levers. You approach them differently, you measure your tone, you calculate your words. That calculation is respect born from uncertainty. You are not loud, you are not dramatic, you are not defensive, and yet the atmosphere shifts around you. This is the culmination of the dark psychology you have stepped into, emotional minimalism as dominance. It is not about cruelty. It is not about indifference to everything. It is about ruthless selectivity. You choose when to speak. You choose when to clarify. You choose when to engage. And because you choose consciously rather than reactively, your presence carries weight. Weight is felt, not announced. There will be moments when decisive action is necessary, when silence must give way to consequence, when ignoring must transform into strategic movement. But even then, your action should emerge from calm deliberation, not wounded ego. When you act without visible anger, your action appears inevitable rather than impulsive. Inevitable actions are feared more than emotional ones. They suggest preparation. They suggest thought. They suggest that while others were shouting, you were calculating. Calculation is invisible power. And now the final truth stands before you, stark and unvarnished. The world will always attempt to pull you into reaction. It will tempt you with outrage. It will seduce you with the need to be understood. It will challenge your pride and whisper that silence is weakness. But silent, sir, when chosen deliberately, is strength refined. Every insult you do not answer weakens your enemy's grip. Every accusation you do not dignify with excessive defense preserves your authority. Every trivial conflict you ignore frees your energy for battles that truly matter. You are here to win positioning. Positioning determines who sets the tone, who controls the pace, who defines the narrative. And positioning is built not in grand gestures, but in the quiet discipline of daily restraint. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, pause, feel the surge of emotion, acknowledge it, and then let it dissolve without expression. Watch their face when your reaction does not arrive. Watch their certainty falter. Watch the subtle shift in power. The next time someone demands explanation beyond what is necessary, offer clarity without apology. Short, direct, complete, then stop speaking. Let the silence expand. Let them sit inside it. The next time trivial hostility seeks your attention, deny it. Not dramatically, not with contempt, simply with absence. And as you practice this again and again, you will feel something grow within you. A steadiness, a gravity, a cold clarity that does not depend on approval or fear. You will realize that most people are fighting wars on the surface, exhausting themselves in noise, while you are shaping outcomes beneath it. This is not about being emotionless. It is about being untouchable by trivial emotion. It is about walking into any room knowing that no one can force your state without your consent. It is about understanding that reaction is surrender, explanation is concession, and indiscriminate engagement is dilution. And it is about choosing, consciously and relentlessly, not to surrender, not to concede, not to dilute. So stand firm in silence when noise surrounds you. Let others reveal themselves through their impatience. Let them underestimate your stillness, then move when you decide. Not when they provoke, not when they demand, not when they expect. Move only when it serves your design. And from this moment forward, guard your reactions like treasures. Guard your explanations like secrets. Guard your attention like a weapon, because the one who cannot be emotionally commanded becomes impossible to dominate. And the world, whether it admits it or not, will always bend around the person who refuses to be moved.